with the Lanner flights, I've seen spectacular flights. The one Lanner flight that I had was on a Cape Franklin, which is quite a big Franklin. The cock's way up to about just over a kilo. And the Lanner came down and smacked this cock so hard that both of them passed out. And there I came upon the hawk and the quarry lying on the ground next to each other. And I thought, which one shall I grab first? Obviously grab the quarry, because the hawk you can always lure down later.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast, and we're winding down now. We're down to the last 3 or 4 episodes or so of the Cape Falconry series here, and we really appreciate you continuing to tune in and listen, and really hope that you have enjoyed this series so far. And want to give a special thanks, of course, to the Cape Falconry Club for helping to make this series happen, and for organizing it all, and for the invite to come out and have us share their stories with the rest of the world. So thank you very much to them. And also a big thank you to the Falconry Heritage Trust for the small grant to help pay for the travel expenses and the airfare to help make this series happen as well. If you want to find out more about them or contribute to their cause, which of course is helping to preserve the cultural heritage of falconry around the world for future generations, then just head to falconryheritage.org. And also a big thank you for the continued support of Baba Yaga Crafts from Poland. If you haven't had a chance to get your hands on any of his really nice handmade falconry gear yet, I highly recommend you do so. It's well worth it, and well worth the money and your time to check it out. It's become a staple of my falconry, and personally, I can't think of using any other anklets or jesses right now. But like I said, if you haven't had a chance to check out any of his stuff yet, head to Baba Yaga Goshawk on Instagram, and you can also get his contact information from our website at falconrytold.com. And I think this will be another episode that you all find very entertaining and informative. Dr. Edmund Oettlé is another falconer who is responsible in part for getting falconry legalized in his respective area, and he also has an interesting history in practicing medicine as well. I found that to be particularly interesting. You'll find out more about that as the episode goes on, and why I probably was interested in that. But anyway, I won't go into that now, but I was also fortunate to be able to pay a visit to his winery and see his vineyard and try out some of the organic wines that he produces. Very interesting guy, and I hope you really enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it and hearing it in person. So anyway, we'll go ahead and just jump right into this conversation with Dr. Edmund Oettlé. Here we go. Thank you for doing this today, and like I said, I appreciate everything you did earlier in the week too, and I really enjoyed your wine and seeing your property and everything. And no, it was a really good time. As I was telling you just a little bit ago, I'm really a big fan of your port wine. That was definitely my favorite, and I will be picking up at least a few bottles. But yeah, so as far as that goes, like how long, you said it was like 30 something years that you lived there?
On the farm, yes, we've been there 33 years. Yeah. Came in 1990.
1990. And I mean, out of curiosity, what was the process like for you kind of cultivating and getting that to the point where, you were it pretty much to where it is today? I mean, how long of a process has that been?
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's a slow process. It wasn't something that I'd learnt, at university or at college. It was just learnt in the school of hard knocks. Make lots of mistakes and go to the specialists, find out people that know what they're doing and get their advice and follow that advice. And that's the way I've learnt all along. So it wasn't a huge change from what I was qualified to do. I'm a veterinarian, and the only difference is that these animals don't run away from you when you need to treat them. Grapevines, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So, they get diseases, they need to be treated, and principles of disease-host interactions are fairly straightforward and similar, whether it's animals or people or plants. First principles apply.
Yeah, I mean, I find all that really fascinating because I know very little to nothing about it. With I do have friends that have experience with winemaking, and I know of people who have vineyards and have done all that, but I was really surprised to see how much chemistry there was in it.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting part of it, of course. Once you really start understanding what's going on, I did quite a bit of work with electron microscopy, and the deeper you go into any subject, whether it's a cell or whether it's a plant or whether it's making wine, the more you learn about it, the more you know how little you know about it, and the more you realize how much more there is to see and to learn. So I always say that you never stop learning.
No, and pretty much any facet of life, I guess, pretty much anything we do. And as the old saying goes, if you think you know it all or learned it all, then you haven't.
Mistake.
Yeah. But about how long do you think it was before, by your trial and error learning with all that, how long do you think it was before you really made something that you thought was, really, I don't know, like, how many batches did you have to go through that were just like, Well,
fortunately, I cut my teeth as a child. From around about when I was 15, I was making wines out of flowers and out of fruits, peaches and mulberries and plums and that sort of stuff, which we grew in the garden in Johannesburg. The actual winemaking process itself is not particularly difficult because grapes are, beautifully composed. Their structure, their composition is just right for making wine. So you're starting with a good raw material. Of course, in the early days, in the 1990s, I didn't know how to farm, so I had to first learn how to farm, and that's in those days there was no Google, there was no internet. You had to write letters, you had to read books and so on. And getting information was difficult. And I always used to say that, the point about an education is not teaching you what you need to know, but teaching you where to find what you need to know. And so that was really, I guess, the starting point is finding out what I need to know in order to do what I'm hoping to do. And the whole process was a slow one. In the beginning, it was just a case of growing grapes and dropping them off at the co-op and, getting your money once a year. But as the time went by, I realized that what I was doing or the way that I was farming was not ultimately sustainable because it just clashed with my understanding of disease-host interactions. And so I slowly changed over to organic. It wasn't like just today we're going to decide to be organic. It was over a period of 2, 3, 4 years that we slowly changed. In the beginning, we experimented with a bit of permaculture, which I still use. It's a very useful type of agriculture. And slowly we changed over. And then I realized that just to produce grapes without actually adding any value wasn't going to be economically viable in the long run. So I had to add the value by making the wine. And the cooperative wasn't interested in giving me any premium for my grapes that were organic. And so we started on a very small scale. We pressed the wine by foot. We moved the juice around by gravity. And then gradually every year just got a little bit more organized and sophisticated to a point that we are at the moment now with a full-blown winery and distillery and, capacity of about 50 ton.
Yeah, it's all really cool stuff. And like I said, I just find that so interesting because there's so much that goes into it, and everything that you were describing whenever you were telling everybody about the different types of wines and stuff that you produce. And I mean, I was, like I said, it was really floored to hear about, the timing needing to be so exact on everything. And, I just can't imagine all the work that goes into that.
Yeah. Well, it's fun also.
Well, it would have to be. I mean, it would have to be for you to want to deal with all that. But yeah. Well, same with falconry too, I guess. But
I always say, the easy part is actually making the product. The difficult part is selling it.
Yeah. And as far as that goes, I mean, have you enjoyed a lot of success and positive feedback with everything?
Yeah. There was a dairyman once which sold his herd and planted grapevines and made wine and so on. And people asked him, why did you do this? And he said, well, nobody told me how nice my rich, creamy milk was. But boy, do I get compliments for my wonderful wines. And I guess that's it. There's always good feedback when it comes to making wine or brandy or port or, liqueurs. Somebody's going to like it. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you said you were the only falconer in this area, or right? That has
in South Africa with the winery. Yeah.
Well, and the thing I noticed about it too, and the other thing I had no idea about, which I don't know why I didn't know about this before, didn't hear about this in passing at least before, is the the contribution of sulfates, giving you headaches and all that kind of stuff. And the one thing I did notice about your wine is that, I normally, the reason why I don't drink wine or haven't really had an affinity for it is because it usually gives me a headache and makes my blood pressure go. When you can hear your pulse, it's like, it's always when I drink wine.
Yeah.
And, with the organic side of things and, the fact that you don't use the sulfates in yours and stuff, I thought that was really pretty cool.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was an interesting tidbit that you shared too was, the part about, the organic aspect of things and, the fish that, they thought was, extinct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Share some of that a little bit because I think people might find that interesting too.
Yeah. Well, there was a little fish called the Berg River redfin, which is not a particularly dramatic looking fish. It's a small fish, a couple of centimeters long, and it's has a red fin only in the breeding season. And of course, there's red fins all over the world, but each little unique ecosystem has its own specific red fin. And the one that was declared extinct was the Berg River redfin. The river that runs past our farm is a tributary of the Berg River. And the reason it went extinct, or was thought to be extinct, was that it's an indicator species. So it's, as soon as you have agricultural pesticides or any too much nitrates from fertilizers or any kind of disturbance to the pristine environment from conventional farming, then the fish dies out. So you would expect it to be found in the headwaters, in the upper reaches of the rivers where there's no farming and the water is clean and pristine. And the problem is that those are exactly the areas where it's cold enough to introduce bass and trout. And as a result of those predatory fish, the Berg River redfin just disappeared in trout breakfast. So it was declared extinct. And then it was discovered in the little bit of river that runs past our farm. The reason being that we're too low for the bass and the trout, and we're above the area where the pesticides are taking place. And with the organic farming, we have this pristine piece of river that runs past us. And as a result of that, we made a wine which we called Not Extinct. And it's a collaboration with Endangered Wildlife Trust of South Africa. And they get 10 Rand for every bottle that we sell, which goes towards their conservation effort. And it's a very good collaboration.
Very cool. Yeah, like I said, I was overall very impressed, and you do have a very beautiful, property and operation there. And like I said, I feel fortunate to have been able to visit there, during this mm-hmm. little excursion. And I mean, like I said, thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But yeah, so kind of moving topics a little bit. how long now? I mean, how many years has it been since you started practicing falconry?
Well, I started as a schoolboy in Standard 8, so, I've been flying birds for over 40 years. And in the beginning, of course, it was illegal where I was living in the Transvaal. And then it was legalized there, and so I joined up with the Transvaal Falconry Club. But shortly after that, after I'd finished my studies, I moved to the Cape, and it was illegal in the Cape. This is the whole of the Cape, from Northern Cape, Western Cape, and Eastern Cape all together. It used to be a single province. And the director of nature conservation at that stage said that over his dead body would there be any falconers in the Cape. So, of course, everybody that was flying any birds was driven underground. And I went to the authorities, and with a substantial amount of effort over about a 2-year period, managed to convince them that we were not going to be an administrative burden to them. We were not going to be a conservation threat to them. And in fact, we were going to have some very significant conservation benefits to them. And they allowed us to start the club. This is a long time ago. My memory kind of fades me, but I think it's around about 1990 or so, or 1989. I think it was 89. But anyway, the club was started, and I was chairman for the first 15 years or so for my sins. Very happy to have passed the baton on to somebody else now. So in the beginning, we had quite a lot of freedom in terms of hunting seasons and what birds we were allowed, and how it worked. And more recently, they've applied a whole pile more administrative hurdles for us to get over. But the club is still up and running all of these years later, and I'm very proud of the fact that the hard work that I put in has borne fruit, and it's been fun, largely fun. I mean, there's been bad bits in between, but on the whole, it's been fun. And now it's great for me to be able to come to meet like this, where I'm not actually flying anything myself at the moment, getting a bit long in the tooth, but I can enjoy other people flying their birds. I don't need personally to fly it myself. I'm very happy to go out with somebody else that flies, and I get just as much pleasure watching their birds fly, and sometimes catching something, sometimes not catching something. That's the way that falconry works. And it's a privilege to have been part of this right from the very beginning. I've not missed a single field meet since its inception.
Very cool. Well, before we talk a little bit more about that, though, I mean, just out of curiosity, I mean, was there a particular moment, though, like whenever you were younger and just starting to get into falconry, like was there a particular event or a particular thing that happened that triggered your interest in becoming a falconer?
Yes, certainly there was. I was on holiday in the Cape and on my grandfather's farm, and one of the labourers had managed fairly accurately to throw a stone at a black-shouldered kite and hit him on the head, and this bird came tumbling down, and it was brought to me as a 15-year-old schoolboy, and I had it for 4 days. It was basically concussed, and it just needed to have a little bit of time to rest. And I let the bird go. My family said, sorry, these things are not allowed to be kept in captivity, and you have to let them go. So with a very heavy heart, I let it go, and then spent the next 2 years reading up on it in old Encyclopedia Britannicas. And of course, in those days, there was very, very little literature. We're talking about 1973. It was very difficult to get anything. So all of the info that I was able to lay my hands on was pretty out-of-date stuff. But it nevertheless got me a solid grounding in terms of what was involved. And then I joined up with the Transvaal Falconry Club. They'd recently become legalized. Passed the test, first shot that they gave me. And because I'd done whatever reading I could, I'd done. And of course, they were equally limited with the amount of literature that was available then. And they gave me initially a rehab black kite, which I then trained up and got ready to be released again. That was successfully released. And then they gave me a steppe buzzard, which had been shot in the wing. So again, just needed to be kept until it was healed. Didn't need any training on how to hunt or anything like that. That bird was a haggard bird, and basically trained it up until it was flying free, and then off it went. And after that, I went on the lanners. I had quite a number of lanners, one after another, and various other birds in between. Took a bit of a breather during my veterinary studies, simply because there wasn't time to fly a bird while you're in full-time study, and picked it up after qualifying. Flew black sparrowhawks. This was all in the Transvaal, and And then when I came down to the Cape, all of a sudden was told, "Sorry, you can't do this anymore," and that was quite difficult.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, yeah, especially doing all that work and juggling, and then I mean, moving to a place where all of a sudden it's just. Sorry about you. And I can,
tough.
Yeah. I can imagine. Well, and I'm assuming then probably that, some of those early experiences with getting some of those birds that you ended up rehabbing and stuff, or was that part of the catalyst for deciding for you to become a vet?
No, I don't think so. For me to become a vet was actually quite a straightforward decision. My dad was a doctor. He died when I was very young, and my two elder brothers both became doctors. And I thought, my word, 4 doctors in the family is over the top. And so, because I'd been involved with birds, particularly ducks and geese, when I was younger, I used to keep ducks and try and get a bit of pocket money by selling their eggs and so on, learning a few basic principles on economics. It kind of was logical to go and study vet science, but as it turns out, I started at Wits University with a straight BSc, because in those days you needed to do a BSc first year before you got accepted. Which is a very good screening, because you can have fantastic matric results, but it doesn't mean you're going to do any good at university. But if you do reasonably well in your first year, then chances are you will carry on. In fact, when I was in my first year, the lecturer walked in and said, "Take a look at the guy in front of you, the guy at your left, and the guy on your right, and out of the 4 of you, only one are going to get through this year." Statistics. 25% pass their first year. So but it does change it when you actually look at these guys and say, okay, who's it going to be?
Yeah. I bet you that was probably pretty intense.
Yeah. So, then at the end of my first year, I didn't get into vet school straight away. And so I started my second year, and then somebody dropped out and I was on the waiting list. And so I got in. So, yeah.
And as far as, kind of the juggling, I mean, how many years were you initially, flying birds or training, or not really training, but I mean, how many years were you working with birds as part of the, the initial club that you were in? And then how long was the gap where you weren't flying because of studies?
Well, the vet science is 5.5 years, or it was when I was doing it. It's 6 years now. But so for those 5.5 years, it was just basically cut out of my life. Yeah. Pretty well everything got cut out of my life.
Yeah.
But after that, I picked up the black spar straight away, because I was in Pretoria. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so you said the black spar was the first bird that you got after that then?
Yeah, and it was the first bird that I actually, well, not quite the first bird, but yeah, it was the first bird that really hunted successfully. As one of the falconers told me, he's never seen a dud black spar. By which he was basically meaning, if your black spar is not doing anything, the problem lies with you. It doesn't lie with the bird. I've seen that many times. I think we're blessed with huge amounts of flyable birds here. We really do have a great variety of birds that are good falconry birds. I always say to people that are asking advice, what bird should I fly? I say, well, what quarry do you have? Once you got the quarry sorted out, then it's fairly straightforward to decide what bird to fly. Mm-hmm. But it's a big mistake to say, no, I want to fly this bird. And then you say, oh, shucks, I have to drive an hour and a half to get to a place where I can find, for argument's sake, a duck or a francolin or something like that. So, it's very important to make sure that you've got your quarry base sorted out first, and then you choose what bird to fly.
Well, I mean, just kind of species specific, though. I mean, like, we kind of all have our theories, falconers in our theories, but I know like passage coops, for example. I mean, I don't know if it's just, we've had these debates and stuff amongst all of us. Like certain species, it just seems like, because of their extremely nervous and high-strung tendencies and things like that, it's harder to find, a percentage of them that's willing to, or has the capacity to, be a falconry bird. But I didn't know what your thoughts were for that, in particular regarding, black spars, because it seems to be the general consensus bird that is closest to like our passage coops in that regard, from what everybody's been saying.
Yeah, well, we have a fairly structured learning process in our club. So it's different from the American system where you're either an apprentice for a year or else you're just a falconer and you can go and do whatever you please. With us, we go through year apprentice. After that, we go through a period of what we call a C grade, which is a novice falconer. And then we go on once they've proved certain capabilities, and we limit the type of hawk to the different grades. Once they've gone through that, they go on to become a B grade, and then that opens up other hawks for them to fly. And then eventually they become what's called an A grade or master falconer, which is really a sort of an honorary title to say that we think that you really have achieved great things with falconry. So by far the bulk of the club are what we call general falconers, and this is really as it should be, because with a decent mentorship program, with a decent structure, I don't believe in chucking people in at the deep end and giving difficult birds to people who really don't know what they're doing. Give them easy birds. I know that easy birds can sometimes give people a sense of sort of confidence which they don't deserve. The Harris hawk falls into that category. But, having said that, if the Harris hawk is a good starting point for somebody to fly, well, go ahead. But I would far prefer the young falconers, young in experience, not in age, to start off with a bird like an African goshawk. They're fairly robust and they're fairly forgiving, and they can take a fair amount of mistakes, and they can teach a falconer a lot. And after that, they go on to one of the other birds. Sort of tongue-in-cheek, I've always said that the next bird that people often go on to is a lanner, but a lanner can teach a smart falconer a lot of things, and a dumb falconer will not learn terribly much from a lanner. They're smart birds. They really are smart birds. Yeah. Often people want to go from the African goshawk onto a black sparrowhawk. With us, the really difficult birds are the small short wings, the things like the musket red-breasted sparrowhawk, or the musket, or the female little sparrowhawk. Little sparrowhawk. I flew one once that this thing was weighing 100 grams. It's really, really tricky to go and fly that thing right, and you've got to get that weight. You've got to weigh it twice a day, feed it twice a day, and it was a rehab bird, but I managed to get it to flying free, and then was able to release it. Again, somebody shot it with a pellet gun or something like that. But from that perspective, the veterinary science has been very useful because I've been able to fix a lot of birds that would otherwise not have been fixed. And not only that, once they've been fixed, we need to get them back into the wild again. I'm an honorary nature conservation officer in the Western Cape, Cape Nature. And that's also been useful because, it just means that Cape Nature has recognized the role that not only I play, but also the Cape Falconry Club plays.
Well, and so kind of, like I said, it sounds like then that because of the way the mentorship structure is here, and you guys are very much, there's a lot of control and a lot of thought put into the type of mentor, for the right type of person and the right type of species. So, I mean, in other words, there's a greater chance of having success with some of these harder, these harder birds like the black spars and stuff, because of the fact that you're pairing someone, a mentor with someone, that has the experience to teach them to be more successful, and the fact that certain people that are getting these birds, it's not as easy for them to get them as if they don't have somebody experience that's assigned to them already with all that. So, yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably a very good thing, and I
think so. I think so.
Yeah. Cause I mean, one of the traps that a lot of, falconers in the U.S., once they get their general license, it's almost kind of a cliche that it's like, oh, I'm going to fly a passage coop now, and I know I kind of fell somewhat into that trap too, or whatever. But no, that's cool. I mean, it sounds like your system, and just judging from all the conversations that I've had so far this week, that you guys have really thought about a lot of those pitfalls and how to avoid them. Yeah.
Well, ultimately, if a falconer makes a mess, it brings the whole sport into disrepute. You can't. Yeah. It's difficult to say to the public who sees somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing, to say, well, actually he's only a C grade and he's still learning. You don't want boo-boos. You want things to run smoothly and run properly. Yeah.
Well, and so kind of going back then to the influence then, or going back to the formation of the club, and I mean, I'm assuming then it didn't sit well, obviously, that whenever you came here, that you couldn't do something you've been doing for a long time,
sure.
And I'm sure that probably had a lot of motivation for you. It gave you a lot of motivation then to kind of be involved in, some of the early formation of all this, to be able to have it legalized again. And I mean, if you don't care, just talk about just some of those hurdles that you had to jump through initially to even get those talks going. I think it's good for a lot of people to hear these type of things.
Yeah, well, I thought that it'd be a good idea to start a conservation project which used peregrines. Now, you see, the big problem was that peregrines were thought to be exceedingly rare in the Cape. And on record in 1987, when I landed in the Cape, there were six breeding pairs that were known. So I went to Percy Fitzpatrick Institute, and I said to them, look, this is the plan that I have. We want to go and get peregrines, and we want to hack them on electric power lines, because we know that Lanners breed on power lines and Marshall Eagles breed on power lines, and the whole pile of stuff breeds there, but peregrines don't. They breed on cliffs, and they're very difficult to find, and there's very few of them here. And I think it would be great if we could just push up the peregrine population a little bit. And on top of it, it would mean that there would be birds available for falconers, and the ramifications are quite significant. So I put together a proposal, a protocol. I said, this is how we're going to do it. And they gave me the rubber stamp, and they said, yeah, cool, nice program, thinks it's a good idea. And so I went to Nature Conservation, and I said to them, this is what I want to do, and I want to get the permits to take these birds from the wild. And they said, sorry, you can't, because there are too few birds. So I said, well, okay, fine, no problem. If I can find some nests which you don't have on record, then technically they don't exist as far as you're concerned. Can I take birds from there? And they said, oh, no, you're sorry, you can't do that. So then around about that time, I linked up with a fellow called Dave Pepler. And Dave Pepler was, he was basically working for the Department of Nature Conservation at the university. So in other words, not the government department, but the university department. And he was doing work on peregrines. And his work with Rob Martin showed that peregrines were in fact not rare at all in this part of the world. And that his analysis showed that there were over 200 pairs between Citrusdal and Swellendam, which is roughly 200 kilometers north of Cape Town to 200 kilometers east of Cape Town. And on the peninsula itself, they're sitting with somewhere around, at that stage, 7 or 8 pairs just on Table Mountain itself. Subsequently, it's increased a whole lot more as people became aware of what to look for and where to find them and so on. Anyway, so I then went back to Cape Nature and I said, this is the work that's done. You guys are a bunch of momparas. There's lots of peregrines here. Why can't you give me permits? And they said, no, sorry, you can't have permits for it. So I was in exasperation. I said, well, okay, can I import peregrines? Oh, yes, of course you can import peregrines. Captive bred peregrines, no problem whatsoever. So I got hold of Walter Bednarek in Germany. Once again, no email, no internet, no, write letters. And again, it was connections. I managed to get hold of him. He was one of the Deutsche Falkenorden directors, one of the chiefs there. And he said he had contact with some German breeders and they were prepared to sell me 2 pairs of German peregrines. So I got the agriculture import permits in order. I got the CITES permits in order. I got everything wrapped up and imported these birds with a colleague of mine, and the two of us went into this business together. And the net result is that I bred the first captive bred peregrine in South Africa. This was, I think, 1989 or 89, correct. 1989, she hatched out the egg. And around about the same time, there was a youngster who subsequently joined the club, but there was no club in those days because it was all illegal. Went and trapped a passage peregrine in Stellenbosch. And I got wind of this, and I went to Nature Conservation. I said, look, number one, I'm breeding these birds. Here's the proof. Number two, youngsters are going out and trapping these birds, and they shouldn't be doing this. And if we were able to have a club which could be self-policing, then we wouldn't have this nonsense going on. And so they then gave me the permit to go and confiscate this bird. And then I rehabilitated it, and with great fanfare, we let it go. And Nature Conservation was there, and, all fine and jolly. The long and the short of it was that was really the catalyst that tipped the balance. And then they said, yeah, look, we can see that given the right management, these guys are going to be policing themselves and informing us of illegal activity, and we can prosecute where we need to from there. And I must say, for over 20 years, we had a fantastic relationship with Cape Nature. More recently, the wheels are falling off the lorry a little bit in terms of government departments. Cape Nature is running short of staff. They're running short of everything. They're running short primarily of competent people. And as a result of that, it's becoming quite difficult. But I'll leave those difficulties to other people who are more up to date with it to fill you in on the details. But the point is that in the early stages, there was just complete resistance. You are not going to do this, to a total about turn. And then every year we gave in a hunting report, and I can't remember how many papers I published, probably about 10 or 15 conservation papers that I published during the time that I was acting as chairman of the club. And of course, every year we sent in nest records to Cape Nature. And Cape Nature was very grateful for this, because all of a sudden we were the eyes and the ears on the ground, giving them the information that they needed to know what is the actual status of the conservation of these birds. And I said to them straight, I said, look, you're never going to see a peregrine sitting in your office in the middle of Cape Town. You need us to go out into the veld and to go and spend time. And I mean, we're all complete lunatics. We spend inordinate amounts of time and money and petrol and stuff driving around, just looking for birds, seeing them, writing it down, recording the fact that these birds are breeding here, and these are how many chicks have hatched out, and this is good, solid observational data that we fed free of charge. Nobody was employed. It cost Cape Nature nothing.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to say. It sounds like you were just basically doing a bunch of free labor for them, and
of course.
and why wouldn't they be accepting of that, or at least why? Surely they would be way less apt to tell you no. For anything.
Yeah, and in fact, the Cape Club is unique in that sense compared with the other clubs in South Africa. Is that we've always had a very strong conservation-orientated approach to what we're doing, and the kind of modus operandi has been to say, look, if we stop being of benefit to Cape Nature, then they're going to stop making our lives easy and going to make it difficult for us. And that's quite, to a degree, what's actually been happening lately.
Yeah, and it's really important to have good relationships with the...
It's key. It's absolute key. And we did our bit for it.
Well, I commend you for that. Not everybody's willing to take up that mantle, but somebody has to. And, I can't imagine, the initial hurdles and dealing with all that, especially while you're juggling a veterinary practice and everything else. How was that? In the early days, did you struggle to find time to fly a bird and also be, form a club and also have a vet practice?
Well, at the time I was working at the university in Cape Town at Groote Hospital. I was, they got me. That's the reason why I came to the Cape, is that they needed somebody to sort out their sperm bank. And in those days, the vets were quite a lot further advanced in artificial reproduction than the doctors were. So that was my first brief, was to sort out the sperm bank, which I did, turned it around and made it profitable and showed them how to do it so that, they still maintained the pregnancy rate that they were hoping for and yet could make a lot of money out of this business. Then after that, they said, no, I must start working on the freezing of the embryos. And so because what was happening is in the IVF laboratories that the women would go and produce, say, 10, 15 eggs after being superovulated. And then they would put those fertilized eggs. They were only allowed to put 4 of them back in again because of the risk of multiple pregnancies. And so the other, whatever was left over, they would just leave in the incubator and just, they would die. Why they didn't just flush them down the loo immediately, I don't know. But they kind of thought they felt it's better to just let them die in the incubator than. So I said, no. Look, guys, you give me these embryos, and I'll freeze them. And then if the woman doesn't fall pregnant on the first time, you don't need to superovulate her again, because you can just use a natural cycle and you can defrost these embryos. And that's exactly what happened. So I got the first frozen baby in South Africa. It happened to be twins, actually, which was very exciting and very satisfying. Around about the same time, I was doing my PhD. And then I decided that after, pretty close on 10 years in practice, in government practice, it was time for me to go into private practice. And so I opened a practice in Brackenfell, just that's outside the Cape Town. Now it's part of the suburbs. In those days, it was close to the country. And just built up a practice from nothing. In a couple of years' time, I thought, no, now it's time for me to bail. And during that time, I was doing my PhD. So I finished up that, handed it in, got that degree, and then decided it's time for a change and went farming. So.
That's crazy. That's one hell of a curve, I mean, doing vet medicine and then working your way into human fertility, and then and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I burn the candle at both ends.
well, I can relate to that. I understand. Yeah. Well, man, it sounds like you're a pretty well versed individual. Then have had a lot of interesting experiences. That's
I've had a full life.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned briefly too that you were the first person to do the raptor breeding side of things too, or the peregrine.
Yes,
I mean, yeah. Just how much work did it take you to have your first successful clutch with that and everything?
Well, I made a homemade incubator out of a cardboard box with a little ether wafer and some light bulbs, light bulbs being the heat source. And I had a pair of peregrines. My colleague had the other pair, and my pair laid a single egg, which I then incubated and it hatched. Yeah.
Man. Well, it's like I said, that's very interesting. Yeah, you kind of just went from one thing to the other, and yeah, that's nuts. I don't know. I mean, did you have a family during this time too?
Well, yeah, I was married.
Yeah.
I was married for 7 years. We got married in '83, and then when we moved to the farm, I said it's now time. That was in 1990, so we, 7 years, just the two of us. Then I said, no, I think it's now time to have kids. And so we have 2 children. They were both born on the farm. And they both now left home. One's a doctor specializing in ophthalmology and the other's a vet. So
Apple didn't fall far from the tree then.
No, afraid not.
Well, very cool. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing a lot of, like I said, I know that mentioned this, well, it's impossible to cover everybody's histories and stuff in totality in an hour-ish time frame. But I appreciate you kind of in general sharing all these different experiences. It's really interesting. And I mean, as far as your personal falconry again, though, kind of going back to that, like, what do you think in all the years that you were flying birds was one of your more memorable hunting stories, flights, experiences with a particular bird? I mean, I'm sure you've got a lot of stories, but
no, look, I'll keep you here till midnight. But yeah, I know. I think it's wrong to focus on any particular bird, because every bird has its strong points and its weak points. And I've always maintained that the most important thing with falconry is obviously not whether you catch something or you don't catch something, but does the bird give its best? Is the bird, or is it just a sort of a, half-hearted flight? But so I get just as big a thrill out of seeing an African goshawk fly off the fist and catch a little dicky bird, rather than seeing 100 flights from the Afgos out the window of a car. Because the bird that's flying off the fist when you're walking up quarry is going to really give it stick. It's going to give it everything. The same with the black spar flights. With the Lanner flights, I've seen spectacular flights. The one Lanner flight that I had was on a Cape Franklin, which is quite a big Franklin. The cock's way up to about just over a kilo. And the Lanner came down and smacked this cock so hard that both of them passed out. And there I came upon the hawk and the quarry lying on the ground next to each other. And I thought, which one shall I grab first? Obviously, grab the quarry, because the hawk you can always lure down later. And so that was one of the memorable flights that I had with the Lanner. And then with the hybrids that I've flown, before that was the peregrine. It was an imprint peregrine, the first one that was bred in this country, and she was a complete darling called Helen, and she laid eggs for me she incubated for me. And then I thought, well, let's see if we can get it to rear things. And so I put in there 3 different age chicks, from a small downy African goshawk to a middle range peregrine to a nearly fledged peregrine that needed parent rearing. And she just fed them all. She just, and for me that was really, truly remarkable to see this maternal instinct in a supremely efficient hunter. She really was a beautiful hunter. I remember Mike Nichols coming out to me. He was from the University of Canterbury, and obviously colleague of Dave Pepler's as well. And he said to Dave, I really would like to go and see some falconry in Africa when he's here. So Dave said, yeah, a friend of mine, he's flying some nice birds. So at that stage, I had this female peregrine imprint, and then I had a TSL peregrine that I'd bred in subsequent years. And I said, sure, come out, and we went, and the female was very efficient at duck, and literally within a minute and a half of slipping her, the duck was in the bag. And we then went after some Franklin with a TSL, and we put the Franklin in the bag, and Mike's jaw just hung open. He said, he always dreamed of falconry in Africa, but he never thought he'd see 2 kills before breakfast. So that was those peregrine kills or flights. Then there was the hybrids, the Joe peregrines that I've flown. I've flown 2 of them, and one a TSL and one a falcon, and both of them were truly spectacular aerial, machines. They were just machines. And it was a little bit like getting into a Lamborghini after you've been driving Volkswagen for your whole life. So it was wonderful to fly those. And the TSL is now about 20 years old, still alive. But I won't go into any particular details except to mention that those birds could stand up on their tails. They really were unbelievable birds, and incredibly intelligent, which I really enjoyed, because most of the other birds that I'd flown, they were nice birds and they flew well and all that sort of stuff, but I wouldn't regard them as intelligent. Whereas you put the Joe into it, and all of a sudden it's a game changer. My regret is that I've never had a chance to fly a pure Joe. I probably never will, but that's just, you can't do everything.
No, you can't. And yeah, if you try to, you're just going to drive yourself nuts. It's an endless pursuit that, unfortunately, it's just like anything else. We're unfortunately probably gonna be in our deathbeds wishing there was enough time for
just one more.
Yeah, just one more. And it's so funny that you say that, because just one more is a saying in our particular hunting group too. It's funny, man. Like,
Rockefeller was asked how much is enough money, and he answered, just a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. Just there's nothing, whenever everybody's caught something and there's game in the bag, and, whenever you hear the words just one more, because, somebody wants to catch just one more bunny or whatever, you're just like, but it's lunch and I'm hungry.
Time to go.
Let's wrap it up, fellas. But no, that's so funny. It really is pretty much the same everywhere,
Yeah.
But, well, like I said, Edmund, I really appreciate you, doing this, and it's been great getting this experience this week, and I wish I had more time. A week in any new place, just it really isn't enough.
Yeah.
And but we do what we can with the time that we're given, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but
that's it.
Yeah. But anyway, like I said, thank you for agreeing to do this, and I do want to end though on one last note and just get one particular piece of advice from you, or a sentiment, or something that you'd like to pass on to current and future generations of falconers, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Sure. Yeah, I think the important thing is to enjoy what you're doing at the time. Don't keep on saying, this is just a stepping stone. I wish I could finish up with this Afgos because I want to have a Lana, or I wish I could finish with this Lana because I want to have this. Whatever you're doing, just give it your best and enjoy the time with it, because the time passes by so quickly, before you blink, you're old. So, and don't think of one bird as better than another bird. Don't think of an Afgos as an inferior bird because the C-grade birds, the guys have to fly them. We had one falconer in the club that was an A-grade falconer, and he used to fly Afgoses, and he was happy. It was the only bird that he really loved flying, and he flew them really well. And yeah, so enjoy what you're doing, and have fun.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, and need to finish our drinks here, and then get on to this evening's festivities.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Edmund.
Alrighty.